Welcome, everyone, to the celebration of the life of Bill Zeckhausen. Let us join our minds and hearts in an opening meditation. For thoughtful, conscious life, all creation is precariously contained in a mended cup of meaning. It is the cup from which we drink our lives. It is the cup from which we drink our lives. It is the cup which is broken and mended over and over again. Each time an era passes, a way of life destroyed, or someone of significance to us dies, we cry out that our cup is broken. And so it is. And yet somehow, together, we must find, and we do find, the way to mend it all over again. Now we are faced with that task of mending once more. We are gathered here this morning by death, the end of a good person's life, the life of Bill Zeckhausen, who passed on March 31st, 2020, with Barbara by his side. Though we mourn, for mourn we must, let this time be a time for affirming the kind of life that Bill lived, a time of celebration of all that was Bill's life. How true are the words of Khalil Gibran, who wrote, "When you are sorrowful, look again in your heart, and you shall see in truth that you are weeping for that which was your great delight." By our presence here this morning, we pay tribute to the memory of Bill, who was an important part of our lives, who was dear to us. We come to show our love and respect for the person Bill was. And we have come together to show our love and support for Bill's family. Their loss is sharp and deep, we know. I was Bill's minister for the last few years of his life at the Unitarian Universalist Society of Laconia, where Bill served as minister years ago for about 6 months, and became a member in April of 2007. Bill was a very active member of our congregation, highly regarded, who sang in our choir and served on our committees. I asked just a few of our members for some of their memories of Bill to share with you now, and everyone had something to say. Jerry Bothamley remembers Bill's love of dogs and Bill's love of Happy Cow ice cream, as well as remembering Bill running by her house before she even became a member of the congregation and stopping and chatting friendly with them. Mary Rivers was deeply touched by Bill's great devotion to Jane Bobbin, who had ALS. Bill would visit Jane weekly and read poems to her until she passed. Don House and Sheila Cunningham recall how Bill always told the story of how he met Barbara and how they were childhood sweethearts. That was one of the first stories Bill told me, too. They recall Bill's pride in his counseling of clergy and doctors and his continuing to educate all of us about Alzheimer's and how he was dealing with it and what it meant to suffer from it. Lauren LeMay, who struggled for years with Lyme disease, who still struggles with Lyme disease, her first memory of Bill is his bringing to her ideas about how to deal with her disease, bringing her books and other ideas for how he found some remedies of his own, for his own aching joints, and perhaps these remedies might be helpful to her. And Reverend Dick Dutton one of our beloved pastors for our congregation, lifts up Bill's listening attentively to him during a sermon, coming to him after the service and often saying something like, "Thank you for what you told me this morning." And Reverend Dick, I too have experienced Bill in this way. He was always supportive of my ministry in whatever ways he could do. When Bill preached his last sermon for our congregation, he received a standing ovation. He was beloved by our congregation. He was. Barbara has asked me to tell you the following. Our Unitarian Universalist Church in Laconia, where Bill was a member, holds just about 100 people. And though it was a special place for Bill in this time of COVID, Barbara realized that we might need to spread out a bit. Bill has had a long connection with the Guilford Church. Before its renovation, he did the eulogy for a beloved prior minister and preached and participated in several funerals here over the years. He also sang over the years with many folks who sing here. So the family is very appreciative for the use of this lovely space. After 15 months, we finally gather for a celebration of his life. And we hope you'll all leave with memories of him that have a smile on your face. And there will be a gathering downstairs to share memories and stories and have a bite to eat before you join the bikers on the road. Those are Barbara's words. And now Dina will have sharing.
First, I want to thank you all for being here, those of you in person, and in a nod to the strangest year ever, those of you watching on your computers at home. It means so much to our family that we could all gather here in person without masks for the most part to remember the life of my father, Bill Zeckhausen. In addition to thanking you for being here, I want to thank you for being there, as in being so incredibly supportive to my parents over the years. When my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, he actually hid the diagnosis for a year. He was really afraid that if he came out with it, that people would tune him out, that he would become isolated, and that his life would become meaningless. When he finally found the courage to openly share his Alzheimer's, of course he did it in a big way, because he was Bill Zeckhausen. He did it with letters to the editor, articles, radio appearances, sermons, and the creation of a support group for people with Alzheimer's. Well, the isolation and the rejection that he feared never materialized thanks to you, good people. This amazing community embraced my parents and provided so much support, whether it was Big Mike playing ping pong with my dad and giving him bear hugs, or Marilyn and Judy spotting him walking along Union Avenue and calling my mother to tell her where his latest adventures were taking him. Whether it was Gil, who hung out with my dad on Wednesdays and let him play with her dog so that my mom could go to choir practice. And Henry Bird, who flapped his wings every time he saw my dad so he would remember his name was Bird. And John Ford, who took my dad for walks, again, to kind of give my mom a break from the caretaking. So many of you helped in so many ways. My brother and I witnessed this many times when we would come up to visit, and it really just touched our hearts. You filled my father's life and continue to fill my mother's life with so much love and so much laughter. It is hard to fathom that my father has been gone for 15 months. Bill made the smart decision to exit this world just as the pandemic was hitting. It was mid-March of 2020 when the world was closing shop and his health took a dramatic turn for the worse. When he realized he could no longer perform daily life functions, he just wanted out. So his worst fear was being a burden to my mother and to us. And with COVID shutting everything down, our worst fear was that my dad, who had helped so many people through dying and through death, would die alone in the hospital. We are so grateful to the staff at Lakes Region General Hospital who moved my father to a floor where my mother could come to visit. And that last week, she was with him every day, all day. We want you to feel comfort in the fact that Bill had a good death. With music playing and holding my mother's hand, he left his body and joined his parents, his brother, Mark, and Bix, and all of the dogs on the other side. So we gather today to mourn his loss, but more importantly, to celebrate the incredible life of a unique man. But how do we sum up 85 years in an hour, Mom? We're going to try an hour, but we'll see. How do we capture the essence of Bill Zeckhausen? Now, many of you know my father in his roles as a minister and a therapist. He used these two roles in overlapping ways, integrating psychological truths into his sermons and spirituality into his psychotherapy. But you probably don't know his origin story, like how he ended up in these dual roles. Well, in college, my dad was a philosophy major because he loved to ponder the big life questions like, why are we here? What's the meaning of life? And why shouldn't I marry my girlfriend during Christmas break of my senior year? So he did just that. And when he got back to campus senior year, he realized, oh my goodness, what have I done? I now have a bride, I'm about to have a philosophy major, and I have no idea how to make a living. So he had what they called back then a breakdown. These days we call it a mental health crisis. And he did what a lot of men in the 50s would not have had the courage to do. He went to therapy. He saw a therapist. And that brave decision helped him find direction. He decided to go into the seminary. A big part of that was actually to get over his crippling fear of public speaking. As he finished seminary, he sought out a church where, quote, his mistakes would not follow him. And he found a tiny little church in a tiny little town, a wee borough in Scotland, where my mom and dad were the only Americans in this little tiny town. Well, his first challenge was that the parishioners expected every Sunday 2 sermons, one in the morning and one in the evening, 2 different sermons. Now, my father had never written or performed one sermon, and so he came up with a brilliant solution. He said, well, in America, we have one sermon, and then we follow that with a coffee hour where we drink coffee and gather and talk about the sermon. And they said, oh, if that's how they do it in America, well, okay then. One funny story from that time, my father would spend hours every week writing a weekly newsletter for the parishioners. After a few months, he went into the bathroom at the church and discovered that the church secretary was tearing up the newsletter to use for toilet paper. He actually found this hilarious, and experiences like this helped my dad to not take himself too seriously. In later years, one of my father's favorite sermon topics was the wounded healer, about how all of us can connect and help each other through the sharing of our struggles and vulnerabilities. Bill shared inspiring tales of Holocaust survivors and Jane Babin with ALS and people who were paraplegic. He never talked about his own wounds. But you might not know by looking at him, but he too was a wounded healer. He had struggled with illness and loss and trauma, but he did not become bitter or closed off. He used those experiences to develop a deep empathy for the suffering of others. I bet if I asked for a show of hands here, how many of you personally experienced Bill's ability to really listen and connect? You know firsthand how healing it could be. Bill was especially adept at group therapy. He had long-term psychotherapy groups that lasted for years as new members would join and old ones would graduate. He ran a lawyers group, clergy groups, doctors groups. The groups for doctors were to help them with the stresses of medicine and to maintain healthy family relationships. One group he had at Concord Hospital lasted for 30 years. He drove to Concord every Monday at 7 in the morning for 30 years to meet with these doctors. Whenever he saw a need, he offered his skills. And his desire to be useful persisted even as his skills diminished. At the end of his life, even though he did not have Parkinson's, he joined the Rocksteady Parkinson's boxing class to improve his physical coordination and strength. He liked to joke that every week he was actually in a ring boxing people with Parkinson's, which of course he was not. But his favorite part of the class was using humor and gestures and his general silliness to connect with the people with Parkinson's. He wanted them to feel that despite their profound physical and communication challenges, that he knew they were still in there and that they mattered. But my father was more than a therapist and a minister. He was a lover of ice cream. He was addicted to dogs. He was self-effacing. He could be insecure. He was goofy. He could be self-centered. He was a trumpet player. He was a highly competitive athlete. He was obsessed with the famed athlete Jimmy Brown. You probably heard his Jimmy Brown stories because he played sports with him in high school at Manhasset High. He was non-judgmental and accepting. He was an idealist and a romantic. He was extremely generous and patient. He was a devoted husband, head over heels in love with his high school sweetheart. He was a super fan of Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. He was the proudest parent and grandparent on the planet. And he had a library of books for dummies, meditation for dummies, swimming for dummies, because he was a continuous work in progress, always growing, learning, evolving. Bill was always seeking opportunities to make connections with fellow Earth travelers, whether he was joking with the teens at Happy Cow, flirting with the Scottish pharmacist at the Rite Aid, or hugging his Uber driver. Down south, they would say he never met a stranger. My father also never outgrew his childlike wonder and appreciation of life itself. Every waking moment was an opportunity to enjoy and notice something funny, cute, beautiful, odd, or delicious. Okay, I'm gonna tell a story that my mom did not want me to tell, but I'm just gonna tell it because it's so adorable. When my dad was in first grade, he was a rascal. Probably if he was in first grade in 2021, they would have diagnosed him with attention deficit disorder and put him on medication. But back then, they didn't do that. They would punish these little boys, and so he got in trouble for talking in class in first grade, and he was sitting in the class at recess while everybody else was out on the playground. So while he sat there, he plotted his revenge. The kids had made little clay penguins, and they were lined up on a shelf. So all alone in the room, he went and he snapped the beaks off of every single penguin except his own. When the teacher came in and saw what he had done, she said, "Billy, did you snap the beaks off of these penguins?" "No, I did not." "Did someone come in the room while I was out?" "Nope." I guess he didn't think that teacher was very smart. She tried all kinds of ways to get him to confess, but he was sticking to his story. Finally, she said, "Billy, you see that clock over there? What time was it when you snapped those beaks off of the penguin?" He was so proud he knew how to tell time. He said, 12:15. Before my parents moved out of their house on Winnecoa Street, my dad showed up at the house bloody and bruised. When Mom asked what had happened, he admitted that he fell. "Oh no, what happened?" He said, "I was chasing a squirrel across Larry's yard." Yes, folks, that was my dad, 82 years old and chasing a squirrel across the neighbor's yard. If there is reincarnation, 100 years ago, a golden retriever died and came back as Bill Zeckhausen. Bill's humor was never mean-spirited, and he was usually the butt of his own jokes. His humor helped him to cope with the indignities of his Alzheimer's. In his final year, a typical Billism would go like this. He would eat a meal and he would say, "This is the best salmon that I have ever had in my life." Of course, I may have had this exact salmon yesterday, but I've got Alzheimer's, so I don't remember. A few years ago, Ernest Thompson, the local author of the movie On Golden Pond, was turning the movie into a play for the Winnipesaukee Playhouse. He interviewed our parents to better flesh out the characters of Norman and Ethel, the husband with dementia and his devoted wife. After meeting my parents, Ernest wrote a beautiful poem called I Will Be With You, and he dedicated it to my mom, later having it set to music. So I took the lyrics to the song and I printed them out onto a painting of two loons on a lake in the pink afterglow of a sunset. My mom hung this painting near the kitchen. During his final years, there were times when my dad would feel insecure and scared that his Alzheimer's was too much of a burden for my mother. He would ask her, "Why don't you leave me?" She would walk him over to the painting and read the words to the song. They gave him comfort. I hope they give you comfort. The words are in your program.
Wherever you go, I'll be with you, you know. If you want to fly, I will paint the sky. With arrows that'll point the way, 'cause there's no crucial task too huge for you to ask. Whatever you pray, I will try to do, if I can, for you, and I will be with you. I will be with you. If ever you fall, I'm the one that you can call. If you're feeling lost and your thoughts get crossed, don't worry, you're beside me now. Come and take my hand. I'll make you understand the sacredest vow that I spoke to you, darling, still holds true. And I will be with you. I will be with you. However we got to this curious spot, where it seems we are, there's a guiding star. To follow all the nights we roam, can you see it glow? As the breezes gently blow us steadily home. And I can promise you, we will make it through, and I will be with you. I will be with you. I can promise you, we will make it through, and I will be with you. I will be with you.
Good morning, and thank you all for coming to share in the celebration of the life of my dad, Bill Zeckhausen. I'm David, his son. I'll probably need a couple minutes after that. This day has been a long time coming, and the process has been especially tough on my mom, Barbara, who wanted to arrange a traditional service in June, then October of last year, only to find everything more and more locked down as time went on. Nobody could fly, nobody could visit, and for a while residents of her retirement community couldn't even leave the grounds, although I've heard rumors that some of them made their escape. But don't tell the managers. But she needed some closure, so my mom choreographed a beautiful memorial service, which was held in October and attended by 9 family members and a close friend of Dad's on the shore and on the waters of Lake Winnisquam. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes bringing you there. The first part of the service was held by an enormous glacial boulder at the water's edge. For the locals, it's in Ahern Park. It's a special place that Barbara and Bill had hiked to many times, and Dad's near daily runs often took him and his running buddies there. Ken Fiery, Dad's friend, artist, we have probably half a dozen paintings hanging in Mom's place from him, and also a fellow minister, started the service with his message and stories. Dad had never been specific about what he wanted for his funeral, other than that Ken speak at it, so it was great that Ken could be there. Mom was next, and started off by explaining all the moving parts of the service, and there were many. Let's just say the word choreographed is appropriate to describe what she pulled together that day and today. She spoke of their meetings with Ernest Thompson, who wrote the play on Golden Pond, which, if those who haven't seen it, was about the twilight years of a loving marriage set on a lakefront cottage in New England, and then the movie that followed was filmed on Squam Lake in Holderness. So that should sound familiar to many of you. Recently, Ernest was preparing a production at a local theater and wanted to explore more deeply the character of Norm Thayer and his progressing Alzheimer's. This was shortly after Dad's decision to go public with his Alzheimer's diagnosis, and while he and Mom were giving presentations in person, on television, radio, and in print to help others cope with the disease. The connection was synchronistic and enormously helpful to Mr. Thompson. Inspired by their relationship and commitment, he wrote the poem, "I Will Be With You," which he then adapted into the song that closed his new show. That's the song you just heard Tamara sing. Mom read those same words by the lake in October. The poem was a real gift to her, especially in the last few months of Bill's life. Next, my sister and her husband read tributes to our dad. The second part of the service took place on the water, where Bill's ashes were released. Rather than scattering them, we dropped them below the surface. My sister, Dina, had arranged for containers to be made by an artist friend, a potter. The containers were not baked, which made them delicate and allowed them to gradually dissolve. So why sink the ashes to the bottom of the lake rather than scattering them on the surface? That's best explained in the words of my mom, spoken before we boarded the boats. To quote my mom, "Bill loved to swim, but always wore goggles. He couldn't understand why I didn't want to. I'd always say, I don't want to know what's down there." But he did. He'd tell me of regularly seeing an eel swimming along the bottom, and it always had a little fish swimming right above his head. He also saw the snapping turtle that made its home in the fallen tree next door. He always wanted to know what was down there. Well, I was content not to look at the creepier, scary things underneath and just stay on the surface. He was someone who always wanted to look deeper and plumb the depths, so this service is a metaphor for his life of searching the depths of himself and others. He was not afraid to go deep. So this is the reason we plan to drop his ashes in the lake in the containers Dina had made, rather than just scattering them on the surface. At that point, everyone except me boarded a large party boat at the dock of a friend's house. Mom had arranged for Dad's kayak, sold years earlier, to be waiting for me nearby. So I climbed in and paddled along the shore to rendezvous with the party boat at the lakefront house they had lived in for nearly 50 years. And that's where I gently lowered one of the 2 clay urns into the water. A little background on why this spot was so meaningful, especially in Dad's former boat. When I was a teenager, about 45 years ago, Dad took me on a road trip to Maine to buy kayaks. It was an impulse purchase, and they could easily have ended up gathering dust in the basement like a couple of Nordic tracks. They were high-performance whitewater kayaks. They were so tippy and unstable, a sneeze or just a backwards glance would result in an instant capsize. We were in over our heads, quite literally, but we didn't give up, and after weeks of practice, we learned to roll them like professionals. The following years, we spent hundreds of hours in the kayaks, exploring all corners of the lake. We paddled past Hog Island, just check out the fancy homes being built at the end of Shore Drive and beyond. Sometimes we paddled straight out across to the other side of the lake, which is a couple miles away. On some days, the water was smooth as glass, and we would glide quietly, sneaking up on turtles or ducks. On really windy days, huge breaking waves would roll across the lake, and we would drive straight into them and then reverse course and come back to the house, surfing across the water at ridiculous speeds. Eventually, I grew up and moved away, but there were many, many trips to New Hampshire, and Dad and I would always spend as much time in the kayaks as possible. At the finish line for all these adventures was the dock where we chose to gather last October and remember him. From a distance, Dad and I would often see Mom standing there waiting for us to return. Dad was super competitive. He excelled at many sports, and those who challenged him in running, swimming, softball, basketball, ping pong, tennis, the list goes on, will not be surprised to hear that making it home first in the kayak was competition too. He had more stamina than me well into his 70s. Okay, so that's probably kind of a low bar. He had more stamina than probably almost everyone here well into his 70s. He could have easily made it home first by just picking up the pace from way out. But then we wouldn't have been kayaking together, which we both loved. So we were always nose to tail on the way in, waiting for the other to make the first move. And when we did, the race was on. By the time we reached the dock, and it didn't matter who got there first, we often barely had enough strength to pull the boats out of the water. That's why it felt perfect to lay Dad's ashes to rest in front of the dock. It's a place he was always racing to return to after his adventures on the lake, and within view of the home he loved for decades. To be able to do it from Dad's old kayak was especially neat. After I lowered the urn into the water, one of Dina's handmade wreaths was dropped over the spot. Then we boated back to Ahern Park, and Dina lowered the second urn into the water, just offshore of the giant boulder where we had started the service that beautiful fall morning. Dad was going deep one more time.
Good morning. I have been blessed to be Barbara's sister for 80 years. When she met Bill, I was in the 6th grade. Little did I know the overwhelming, positive, and loving presence Bill would have in my life and in my family's life, nor the depth of the relationship we would share through the ensuing years. I was able to witness Bill grow and mature as a husband, preacher, clinical psychologist, father, uncle, grandfather, athlete, musician, and best friend. His lifelong dedication to study and his work with both individuals and groups made an immeasurable difference in the quality of countless lives in this community and elsewhere. Bill was a major player in the significant events which punctuated our family's lives. His spirituality and loving counsel were always welcome. He helped us through our most challenging times, losing a husband and a grown son. He also officiated at the joyous milestones in our lives that we celebrated throughout the years. We are grateful for the indelible memories of family gatherings on lakes in New Hampshire and on Lake Almanor in California. 3 generations of family who are on different coasts have shared stories, laughter, nature, activities, and are here today to honor Bill's life and to celebrate the bond of family. Bill was a very talented athlete, as you've heard, and he excelled in just about every sport. Several years ago, he was kind enough to agree to run a 10K with Barbara and me. The funny thing was, we never saw him after the start. He was my all-time favorite tennis partner. We often won, as he could cover the entire court. All I had to say was, yours. Bill always encouraged us to dig deep and be the best we could be. One of the last endeavors in his life made the greatest impression upon me. After his diagnosis of Alzheimer's, Bill made the courageous decision to use the time he had left to help others with a similar incomprehensible diagnosis. He became a powerful advocate for improved and compassionate Alzheimer's care. Barbara joined him. While he worked with the patients, she led groups of the patients' spouses and caregivers. What an extraordinary team. What a gift of love. We miss Bill's physical presence, but the gifts he imparted to us individually and collectively will live on in our hearts. In closing, I want to share how much I admire the courage, grace, and compassion exhibited by my sister throughout Bill's illness. She continues to be my inspiration.
Good morning. In 1965, I met Bill in the summer following my junior year at Manhasset High School on Long Island, New York. He was demonstrating the newest Electrolux vacuum cleaner to my parents. My father was a corporate attorney for Westinghouse Broadcasting Company, and a loyal employee owned a Westinghouse tank vacuum cleaner. Bill started his presentation by vacuuming a small portion of the oriental carpet in our living room with my parents' vacuum. He then vacuumed the same area with the Electrolux vacuum. Bill then emptied that cloth bag on the rug and extracted more dirt than the Westinghouse vacuum. My father said, "Bill, what am I going to tell my employer if I were to buy your Electrolux vacuum machine and not use our Westinghouse vacuum?" Bill, the confident, self-assured 21-year-old college student, dressed in a blue cord suit, immediately replied, "Mr. Steen, if I had to use an inferior product made by my employer as a condition of employment, I'd quit." My father immediately reached for his checkbook and purchased the Electrolux machine right then and there. I was so impressed with Bill, I asked him if I were too young at 16 to sell vacuum cleaners door to door. He subsequently became my mentor. Selling vacuum cleaners to total strangers gave me confidence and taught me self-reliance and salesmanship skills, which I have been able to use my entire life. I will always be grateful to Bill for setting the bar so high. Little did I know that 25 years later, I would marry Bill's wife's sister, Betsy. My next encounter with Bill was in 1981 when he officiated at our wedding ceremony on Father's Day in Long Beach, California. Our 3 sons gave their mother away, and my father was my best man. That was the beginning of summer family reunions on lakes in New Hampshire and later at Lake Almanor in California. Together, we shared magical family times, submerging ourselves in all that the area offered. We enjoyed the lake, climbing mountains, playing tennis, and golf. Bill was a talented athlete and always a fierce competitor. We also skied together as families. We visited the Science Center and attended summer stock productions. Each year, we grew closer as families. In 2006, the Zeckhausen, Steen, Bixby clan gathered on Church Island in Squam Lake for a very special ceremony. Bill's brother, Paul, blessed Bill and Barbara's renewal of their wedding vows on their 50th wedding anniversary. Barbara and Betsy wore their wedding gowns, and the grandchildren escorted them down the aisle. Then Bill officiated at the renewal of our vows on our 25th wedding anniversary. We even had loons escort our boat back to the mainland, and where we celebrated with dinner and dancing. Bill also officiated the weddings of our children, Mark and Teresa and Grant and Heidi. In 2011, he officiated at our son Mark's celebration of life. I'm grateful to have had Bill as a mentor, a spiritual counselor, a brother-in-law, and a friend. Bill is greatly missed, but he is remembered with love.
I'm back again, but just for a minute. Thank you, Denny. Now, tag teaming onto Denny's story, Bill made a lot of money selling vacuum cleaners the summer of his sophomore year. In fact, Williams College listed the big earners for summer jobs, and my dad was at the top. When he bragged about this to his roommate, David Kleinbard, David just shook his head. "Bill, I expect more from you than to sell vacuum cleaners." While at first this took the wind out of his sails, this comment stuck with him. David sensed that Bill had greater potential and would be more fulfilled pursuing a meaningful career. David's comment planted a seed which blossomed into Bill's pursuit of the ministry and his commitment to a meaningful life. In fact, David's gift to Bill meant so much that Bill named his son David after this dear friend. In his later years, Dad developed this little quirk, which bothered me at the time. This quirk was that he exaggerated people's wonderfulness. For example, I would write an article and he would say, "You could write for the New York Times." He would see Cooper playing baseball and he would say, "You could play for the Atlanta Braves." He would see Skylar in a school play and say, "Skylar, you could be on Broadway." Well, I used to roll my eyes and think, "Dad, you are so out of touch. I know you love us, but none of us are that talented, gifted, or amazing." Now, taken one way, these comments could feel like pressure. Like if you don't achieve that level of greatness, somehow you have disappointed my father or let him down. But in retrospect, I have a different view. My dad saw infinite potential and possibilities in people. This was not pressure. These were seeds he was planting, just like his roommate planted in him. His gift was to constantly be seeking and finding the gifts, the infinite possibilities in others. As his daughter, I certainly appreciated his encouragement surrounding my achievements, but he really shined in the dad department when I was at my worst, whenever I messed up. David, you can attest to this as well. Whenever we messed up, we knew it was safe to tell my dad about it, and he never seemed disappointed. He would listen non-judgmentally and support us in whatever way we needed support. This gift of consistent love, whether we were shining or we were flopping, served as an emotional safety net throughout our lives. Bill was always planting this seed. "I see something special in you. You matter. Believe in yourself." The singer Enya had special meaning for Bill, as her voice was a soothing balm for his soul. This song by Enya touched me deeply, and it captures my feelings about Dad's special gifts. The words are in your program. Please enjoy.
A thousand dreams Good morning, I'm Bill's nephew, Brett Bixby. Bill loved his ministry, his family, his practice, and this community. After losing my father at a young age, he was a role model for me of how to be a compassionate man. He will always be one of my most beloved spiritual, emotional, and intellectual mentors. Our West Coast family visited New Hampshire just about every summer of my mid to late childhood. Not only was New Hampshire a natural outdoor paradise, but for me, it was an opportunity to pick the mind of a man who was unafraid to talk about his feelings and trained to mirror you toward a deeper understanding of yourself, your connections to your loved ones, the larger world, and what it means to be an empathetic human being. I will miss our long conversations about life. Bill spoke frankly about his relationships, his fears, his past, and many of his own struggles, as I did mine. He would rest his piercing blue gaze and listen intently. He would ask questions, and like well-placed mirrors, we would arrive at a place where the reflections allowed us an opportunity to turn struggle into growth, frustration into understanding, and fear into empowerment. Bill was a healer. He knew that honest communication at its best summons the promise of new personal enlightenment. Part of sharing love is sharing loss. A musician named Nick Cave, who lost his son in a tragic accident, offers an elegant perspective on grief. I quote, "It seems to me that if we love, we grieve. That's the deal, that's the pact. Grief and love are forever intertwined. Grief is the terrible reminder of the depths of our love, and like love, grief is non-negotiable. I am grateful I was able to tell Bill how much I loved him and how much I valued his influence on my life. Fundamentally, the Bible teaches us to love and to be kind to one another. Colossians 3:12 says, "Clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience." My experiences tell me that our existence is incredibly fragile, but Bill knew that faith and love also fortify us with immense resilience. In A Man's Search for Meaning, one of Bill's favorite books, Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor, speaks of meaningfulness. Happiness is a fleeting state. Frankl asserts that meaningfulness is where the depth of life is captured, where the joys and sorrows of life share a larger ocean. Bill lived a meaningful life, from Laconia to Concord to our California family and beyond. His influence on countless lives was manifest, bountiful, and beautiful. I would like to take a moment to recognize Barbara, a remarkable woman, wife, caregiver, mother, grandmother, aunt, friend, legislator, community organizer, and arts supporter. I also want to extend my profound love to the entire Zeckhausen family, my family, and to all of you who are here today to honor Bill. I miss him dearly, but I'm immensely grateful for his lasting imprint on my spirit. Let us share this space of gratitude, celebrate the gift of Bill's wonderful life, and allow his beautiful reflection to shine on within our hearts. Blessings to you all.
I invite you all to stand for the recitation of the 23rd Psalm found in your order of worship. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down green pastures. He leadeth me beside beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen, and blessed be, and please be seated.
Good afternoon. I wanted to begin by thanking Barbara for asking me to describe the physician support group, which Bill facilitated during the last half of his professional life. In the mid-1980s, a group of physicians in Concord started a physician support group in order to avoid professional burnout and gain a better understanding of the personal and relational stresses associated with the practice of medicine. The idea of a support group for doctors came from my original partner, Dr. Dan Eubank. The suggestion that Bill Zeckhausen be the facilitator of our group came from several of Bill's peers, pastoral counselors practicing in Concord. The outcome of our novel experiment was a 30-year partnership of a talented, compassionate pastoral counselor and 8 family physicians that challenged and inspired all 9 of us and provided enormous benefit to ourselves, our families, our patients, and our community. During the initial months of our group meetings, we doctors did our best to hide our deeper feelings and complain about minor things such as our long work days, our lack of sleep, and the system issues that made doctoring such a hassle. We were feeling vulnerable. Each of us new to the role of attending physician, early in our marriages, and rookies in our parenting. Bill sensed our vulnerabilities. He began each session by going around the table and inviting each of us to check in by reporting any pressing issues in our lives that we wish to discuss. Invariably, Bill would ask the presenting doctor how the issue made her feel. Over time, trust was established, and we doctors felt free to weep, to rant, and dip into the deeper issues of shame, anger, competitiveness, sadness, and broken relationships. And so, we proceeded every Monday for at least an hour during most weeks for 30 years. By working with Bill and each other, we doctors grew in our emotional self-awareness and learned to listen more empathetically and act more compassionately. In time, many of us chose to use the strengths and the confidence acquired in the support group to expand our professional interests. Some working with Bill to present the concept of support groups in published medical journals and workshops, one doctor becoming a hospice director, another starting to advocate for more progressive public policies in healthcare, some devoting more time to teaching doctors in training, working in nursing homes, and helping create the Concord Hospital Ethics Committee. After Bill's retirement due to Alzheimer's, the support group has continued to meet, albeit without a facilitator. I am told that important issues continue to be shared in a trusting and compassionate manner. As Bill became more forgetful, I was privileged to visit with him and Barbara on several occasions. Bill recognized me and continued to consider me a dear friend. He also saw me, I'm convinced, as representing the group of doctors he cherished. During one of our final visits, Bill called me close and said, "I love you." Again, I know he was speaking not just to me, but to all of the doctors in our group. I responded, "I love you." And with that, we parted gratefully.
Good afternoon. I'm honored to have been asked to share a few words this afternoon about my Uncle Bill. Bill was my father Paul's younger brother and only sibling, so our connection lasted 57 of my 58 years. After we lost my dad unexpectedly and way too early in 2009, my bond with Bill grew even stronger. He took on a fatherly role and became a rock for me through some long and lonely lows during my years as a single mother of 3. Bill truly got depression and anxiety, something I suffered from during those challenging years. While others shied away and weren't sure how to help, Bill was always at the other end of the phone, offering wise and sometimes humorous advice from his own mental health struggles and his years of counseling others. It was during those years that Bill started sending me psychology and self-help books from a company I had never heard of, Amazon. I think he was one of its earliest and best customers. He was always thirsty for knowledge and loved to share what he learned. I was eager to bring a few serious boyfriends to meet Bill and Barbara, and each time, Bill would step in the way he imagined my father would have, asking about their goals, plans, and quite importantly, their politics. If he got a good vibe, he would say, "When are you two getting married?" But I don't think he ever entirely approved of or bonded with any of my prospects until my fiancé Tom came along. Bill and Tom had a special connection, and it meant so much to me to know that he fully approved of our engagement. He would tease Tom mercilessly, and he loved the fact that Tom could take it and dish it out too. It saddens us both that he won't be there to officiate at our now twice postponed wedding in July of next year. As a child, a highlight of every summer was our vacations at our grandparents' lake house in Meredith on Lake Waukewan, in part because it meant spending time with the New Hampshire Zeckhausens. Things that stand out in my memories of those early visits include Bill's commitment to his fitness, his discipline when it came to eating right, and his love of my father. He would always take Dad aside for long conversations about their shared ministries or something they'd recently read. Dad and Bill followed similar paths, as many of you may know. They both attended Williams College for their undergraduate degrees and Andover Newton Theological School for advanced degrees, and they both became ordained ministers of the United Church of Christ. Each was an excellent preacher and provided me with an awesome example of what a pastor should be. My most beloved job was as Director of Communications at Andover Newton, where I received my Master of Arts. I cherish the memorial brick with all 3 of our names and graduation years that I saved when the campus moved from Newton Center to Yale in New Haven. I was so impressed with how Bill handled his diagnosis. Naturally devastated at first, he didn't wallow in it, but decided to share as much as he could about his experience while he still could with others going through it. As he did throughout his life and career, he made a difference in many people's lives right up until the very end. Bill never lost his sense of humor or that twinkle in his eye. On our last visit, we played a mean game of ping pong at the Taylor community. Even though he was beginning to have balance issues and was pretty unsteady, he was still a fierce competitor. Neither of us wanted to be the first to quit. Since Bill was such a direct link to my father, it hit me really hard when he died. I miss him and think of him so often, but it gives me comfort to know that he and Dad have been reunited. I am so blessed to have had not one but two amazing men as mentors and role models. Those Zeckhausen boys were really something else.
Hello, everybody. I'm Grant Bixby, and I am Mark and Brett Bixby's little brother and Bill's nephew. And I want to thank Barbara for having already created such a memorable day today. When she asked me if I would be willing to speak, I was first of all flattered and humbled. And when I looked at the program, I was excited because I saw that I was listed near the end. And I naturally assumed, that's an order of ascending importance in Bill's life. And then she said, Grant, you got to keep it to 2 minutes. So much for that. But I want to share a story about Bill that involved Mark, Brett, and I, because so much of our life and my life, we were spent together with Bill. And one day we showed up, we were in New Hampshire for our normal summer vacation, and Bill said, let's go play basketball. There's a pickup game at a gym. I don't remember where the gym was, but so the three of us showed up with Bill. And we were in our teens and 20s, and in probably the best shape of our life. And Bill was pretty darn fit for somebody who was probably at the time 50-ish or in his 50s. But we're thinking, coming from California, three young guys, we're going to school these guys. They were all in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and we felt like we're going to take it to them. And Bill was a good basketball player. He was rangy and lanky. He had a good layup. He could run. He could dribble. He could do a little fadeaway shooter, jumper, and even had a little bit of a sky hook that he could put down sometimes. Also had great court vision. Like in life, he could look at a group of people and really evaluate, who were the important people out there? Who do we need to worry about? He could just assess the situation. He could pick out people's strengths and weaknesses and would know naturally how to react. And I'm an above-average basketball player. And when I say that, I mean that I turn the ball over more and I miss more shots than the average basketball player. And so I was mostly concerned about not embarrassing myself and my brothers. And we fought hard. We played probably 2 or 3 pickup games, none of which we won. And as the games progressed, as brothers, we got more competitive. We got angrier at each other, and Bill would have to pull us into a little huddle and say, come on, guys, okay, let's focus, let's do this, let's do that, always in a very positive way and an encouraging way. But nevertheless, it was hard to take. And I had to chuckle when Dina was talking earlier and talked about how Bill would always see the best in everybody and voice an encouraging comment that was always meant, to be taken positively. And when we got back to the cottage after the basketball game, we were all feeling pretty dejected. But then when everybody asked, how did it go? To hear Bill's retelling of the story, I was thinking, what planet is this guy on? Because we were great. I mean, it was brotherly competition and the grit and determination. And I mean, nothing about the air balls, nothing about our poor play or the fact that maybe we didn't play as well as we could have together because we were all concerned about our individual performance. And that was just his way. And I want to just share something about him, or a quote rather, that made me think of Bill, because it's all about putting it out there. And many of you have heard this, but I'll read it, and it's from Theodore Roosevelt, titled "The Man in the Arena." "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, comes up short again and again. But because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." I will remember Bill for many things. I will miss, and I will remember our jogs on the bumpy dirt road as a kid. I will miss how he used to sit with me when I was young and actually ask me questions and want to know about my life rather than looking or talking past me. And I will miss our spirited verbal jousting and joking back and forth as more mature adults and as fathers. And I want to thank Barbara again for allowing me to speak. Love you, Bill.
Hey, I'm Skylar. I'm Bill's grandson. My first name is William, also named after him. But I didn't just get his name, though. I got way more than that. I got his genetics and this shirt. I want to talk about in ways he tried to relate to me. When I was a boy, he'd often make the effort to travel to watch me play baseball or soccer, God bless him, or see me in a show. He wanted to be involved in everything. He wanted to be involved in everything all the time. If there were 3 Bills all at once, you wouldn't notice. He just wanted to be everywhere all the time, doing and being involved. He would roll around with our dog. He would kayak. He would play tennis. He would go swimming, play trumpet. And one time I saw him kick a soccer ball as hard as he could, well into his 80s. He would run, and while he ran, he would bounce a tennis ball because running was just a bit boring. When I was a boy, he came to see me in a musical, and he sat towards the back. And at the end of the show, he came up to me and he said, "You sounded amazing. It was just, I loved it." He said, "From start to finish, it was so enjoyable." And I thought, it made me feel so good. I couldn't wait to tell my mom. And I told her, and she said, "Oh, sweetie, he couldn't hear a word from the show." In my eyes, he wanted to place a marker on everyone he met that said, "Bill was here." In parentheses, "I hope you enjoyed it." I watched him go up to so many strangers, people he didn't know, and just strike up a conversation, give them a compliment, start up banter, make a joke. He would jab at people. He was a master at conversation, and he knew how to make people feel great and comfortable in a moment. One thing that was amazing was as his dementia worsened, that behavior never changed. So you would see him start these conversations with these strangers, and you would have no clue where it was going, but it was out of sheer desire to make someone feel great for just a second. But he didn't lack depth. He was an empathetic listener, and he wanted to understand us and help us out with his wisdom and words. His aura was youthful and comforting, and he'd often try to relate and humor me. He'd sit with my dad for hours, and they would talk, and they're both such calm, good listeners that I would imagine no words would have to be said for hours, and they would totally understand how the other felt. He knew how to put you at ease and also say the right thing to keep you on your feet and keep you engaged. And he knew how to get to the root of an issue you were dealing with so quickly. He created deep and lasting connections with the people around him, and that includes everyone here today. I knew him as Grandpa, and I'm very sad that I could not know him man to man. I know my soul's connection with him is still relevant, and I feel his wisdom and his openness when I am open to it. He had a hard time saying "I love you" to me. I think he thought love was reserved for very few people, like these people in the front row. It was an intense connection that he wanted. I would say, "Bye, Grandpa, I love you," and he would go, "Okay." I, however, feel comfortable saying it, and so when I say I love him, even if he doesn't say it back, I know he would feel the same way. I'm grateful that we could all be here to celebrate his life. Thank you all for being here. I love you, Grandpa. Thank you.
I've heard it said that people come into our lives a ship blown from its mooring by a wind of the sea, like a seed dropped by a skybird in a distant wood. Who can say if I've been changed for the better? But because I knew you,
Because I knew you,
I have been changed for good.
and just to clear the air, I ask forgiveness for the things I've done you blame me for.
But then I guess we know there's blame to share, and none of it seems to matter anymore. Like a ship blown from its mooring by a wind of the sea, like a seed dropped by a bird in the wood. Who can say if I've been changed for the better? I do believe I have been changed for the better.
Because I knew you,
Because I knew you. Because I knew you. I have been changed for good.
We are gathered in the presence of a deep and abiding mystery. With humble hearts, we bow before the veil which has fallen between us and the one we loved. Let none fear, for greater than sorrow is love, which endures through pain and conquers even grief. Love binds all hearts in bonds of fellowship and courage. They who love unselfishly face even the depths with courage, for their strength is the strength of many, and their courage rests upon the love of friends. And now may the peace which passes understanding, the peace which comes with acceptance and thanksgiving, the peace of the Spirit which rises above all the strains of the earth, be and abide with us both this day and forevermore. Amen. Blessed be Asante.